RevOpsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevOpsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevOpsAF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS, for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
Do you want to prove your RevOps expertise and stand out in a crowded job market? Then you'll want to check out the Revenue Operations Certification, built for operators who want to level up their careers. Accountants have the CPA, project management professionals have the PMP, and now revenue operators have the ROC. The ROC is based on the best-selling book on revenue operations by Stephen Diorio and is the equivalent of an MBA-level course on RevOps. With the ROC, you'll master the core pillars of revenue operations, join a cohort of your peers, tackle real-world case studies, and walk away with a credential that hiring managers and executives recognize. Operators from Google, Backblaze, eMoney Advisor, and others have already gotten certified. So what are you waiting for? If you're serious about accelerating your RevOps careers, check it out today at RevOpsCoop.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the RevOpsAF podcast, where we talk to people who are RevOps about things that are RevOpsAF. And today we are sitting down with Steve Busby, who is the CEO and founder of Revenue Operations Associates, and Stephen Diorio, who is a partner at Revenue Operations Associates and author of the book Revenue Operations. I am your co-host, Matt Volm, CEO and founder of RevOps Co-op, a global community of 17,000 plus members from all across the globe. Today, we are going to be talking about how to advance your career in revenue operations. So, gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Before we jump into a lot of the topic and content today, Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and Revenue Operations Associates, and Stephen, and what you guys all do, the problems that you solve, the types of folks that you help, because I think that'll set a really good stage for people to understand why you're very well equipped to kind of help answer these questions around career advancement in revenue operations.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. And hello, everybody. Yeah, my background, I was CEO of a consulting data and analytics company for many years, grew it and transformed it, eventually sold it. But in learning more about revenue operations, I had the epiphany that as a CEO, you are effectively doing revenue operations, people, process, product, technology, alignment, culture, systems. So I got super excited as, thinking about what to do next and saying, geez, this is so important that why don't we start a company, which we did, called Revenue Operations Associates, to sort of help people with the tools and methods to be able to implement RevOps as a critical business strategy. So that's what we're up to. We'll talk a little bit more about the tools and services we provide to help people like you advance careers personally, but also help your company sort of get RevOps holistically and do it right, where it's a lot more fun and has a lot more impact.
And Stephen, let's talk a little bit about the book as well. What was the impetus for the book? Tell us more about why you wrote the book, what's all in the book, and then we can get into some other questions.
Sure. I'm an engineer by training. In the last century, I built one of the first go-to-market strategy firms. In my work, I saw the disconnect between marketing, sales, and eventually customer success and the finance team, and that disconnect needed to be bridged. I subsequently became the first MarTech sales tech analyst at what was then the Meta Group, now Gartner Group. I led initiatives across the industry on marketing accountability and sales enablement. But at the end of the day, there's a need for organizations to connect the assets and teams and processes that drive growth. It's a never-ending quest. And that led me to write the book on revenue operations. Some of the underlying dynamics are unknown to most CFOs. Is half of what drives growth in a company is really data, technology, content, and what is called assets. And most organizations treat those as expenses. So I think the book is a way for me to get all the revenue generating functions working together towards growth and provide a financial basis for motivating them to do so. And that marries up very nicely with the benchmarks and education program that we offer at Revenue Operations Associates to make that happen.
Well, and so Steve Busby, back to you. You mentioned, as a CEO, some of the things that you're responsible for, that you've been responsible for, that a lot of CEOs are responsible for. Why do you feel revenue operations has emerged and become this critical role and really primary factor in the growth equation, especially for B2B businesses? It's been a growing career over the last several years. There were how many years in a row that LinkedIn said RevOps was one of the fastest growing job titles on their platform. So why do you feel that this is such a important and critical role?
Yeah, I think a lot about the evolution of RevOps, and we're trying to accelerate that evolution. But certainly, when tendencies in companies started to happen and, people thought about, customer centricity and alignment, speed, efficiency, leverage, productivity. You had the advent of the CRO, which was great. Let's put sales, marketing, and customer success together under a single leader. So, revenue operations was always being done. I don't know if it was being done well, but those were catalysts to sort of bring it onto the stage, and it's spreading from there. But I think about revenue operations as, as a CEO, you spend, and with the board, a ton of time on strategy and your revenue plan and your go-to-market plan. And that gets vetted and scrubbed because you're accountable for it. So, it's what keeps you up at night. And I think of revenue operations as it's exactly what it says. It's the operational execution of the revenue strategy. And it started with a very myopic, this is sales enablement. It's, marketing enablement. It's CRM, critical tactical things, but it's so much more than that. So I think, Matt, while we're advancing rapidly, certainly less than 10% of the companies that I see, I would say, are really holistically getting RevOps and its, potential, again, as a continuous strategic process to execute the revenue strategy. But the flip side of that gets me super excited because there's so much opportunity, both at the, C-suite level to embrace it and get everyone aligned. And when you see companies that really get it and the CEO has consumed the Kool-Aid, and they talk the language, and it's about teamwork, alignment, cross-functional execution, managing the business across the revenue cycle, not in silos. They're really fun places to work, and I think financial performance is better. And, from a career standpoint, those are the spots you want to be, because if you can add value in doing those things as a RevOps pro, you're really going to be a high-value commodity.
Yeah. I always say any business on the face of the planet that has revenue, that's generating revenue, has revenue operations as a responsibility somewhere within their company. Like you said, they are obviously executing against some sort of plan or something to drive those results. Eventually, you start to place that responsibility with a dedicated person or a dedicated team. But if you're a business generating revenue, you have revenue operations responsibilities somewhere within your company.
Yeah, from an advice standpoint, I mean, everyone knows how RevOps is evolving. These little seeds are sprouting from wherever they are in the organization. Do yourself a favor and learn the entire revenue cycle, which is effectively entire business. How do we, make customers aware? What's our value prop? How are we thinking about target segments? Nurturing all the way through winning a client and then growing them, expansion revenue, and then that continuous improvement around that. So if you understand how the whole business works across functions, it's going to provide this natural kind of chassis and, paradigm for you to be thinking about how you, go from the top down and really pull RevOps up, as opposed to sort of waiting for, somebody to give you some fertilizer and water and grow from the bottom up. And, we love RevOps professionals that sort of have that strategic DNA, but the opportunity is huge because every company needs someone that can see the entire revenue cycle, diagnose, okay, I'm going to prioritize where in that cycle we've got actions that are going to have the biggest impact that are feasible. And then most importantly, go affect change, go get bleep done. And RevOps is sitting right there in the best position to do that because of their cross-functional, position.
Yeah. Stephen, question for you. A lot of times revenue operators, and I'm sure a lot of folks listening to this podcast episode, this resonates as well. A lot of the job of an operator deals with technology. We actually did a digital event together recently about how revenue operators can break out of the CRM box, because typically when you think of RevOps, a lot of times the first thing you think of is CRM administration. You think of building systems, building integrations, and that is certainly a key part of the role. But you've obviously written a book on revenue operations. I'm guessing that book is not 100% about managing tools and systems. There's a lot of other elements when it comes to revenue operations, things like analytics, financial acumen, understanding how those inputs actually generate financial results on the income statement, on the P&L, the things that are critical for the business. So, Stephen, tell us a little bit, like, what are those things outside of technology and systems that are super important for people in revenue operations, especially when it comes to career advancement, and why are they so critical and so important?
Matt, you make a great point. I mean, having looked at this historically, yes, growing a business has become a technology-enabled team sport. There are 13,000 different tech solutions that can help, and it's a good quarter of the go-to-market mix. But I think RevOps is over-biased towards technology execution, and Ashwi Pancholi, who leads a really big RevOps team at GE and other places, said, I characterize RevOps as people with incredible domain expertise. Many of those domains, as you pointed out, are CRM administration, perhaps running CPQ, or some of the the enablement platforms. And there's plenty of places to learn about that. But the reality is we built a gearbox and there are 45 specific domains. And you're right, they span not just technology, but the people and the process and the data and the finance. And I think you make a really good point, because if you look at what holds revenue operations professionals and their leaders back, it's three big things. One is financial acumen. The number one complaint you and I, Matt, hear all the time is I cannot communicate the value of what I do to my CFO, my boss, my peers, or even my boyfriend, girlfriend, mother, spouse. So, and why? Because every other organization has a financial vocabulary that describes it. People in the factory have all sorts of operating metrics. Finance obviously has operating metrics. Sales and marketing lack an asset intensity to them where it's incredibly difficult to turn it into accounting language. In fact, the whole accounting community has really hurt RevOps because accounting rules will not recognize anything we do other than something as an expense. So financial acumen, the ability to speak the language of business with your peers in other organizations, is a huge impediment. And certainly you can get this in business school, but the people who go into RevOps come there from their BDRs, they're coming out of sales. A lot of them are English majors. They're very good at their job. A lot of them are technical people. And so there's no, if you're a product manager, you've probably got an MBA and know about brand management, and we're trained in that. If you're a CPA, you've obviously got a finance degree. You're a CPA, Matt. You're trained and certified in that. But people learn RevOps on the street, on the job, from technology vendors. They're mostly certified in technology platforms, and they really lack just the basic financial vocabulary. And that's a root problem. It's easily fixed. In fact, Steve gives a nice lecture on the math of growth, but it's a simple but basic fact. The other one is collaboration. If you look at the things that drive value in a business, many of them almost involve teamwork, which means you have to understand the domain of the person you're working at. So if you think about growth as 45 gears, and Steve can show you those 45 gears, we've got some articles you and I've written, Matt, but everybody is good in their domain. I was talking to a CRM administrator. They can tell me about objects, cleaning data, pulling out pipelines, scrubbing, targeting, prioritizing. But they don't know how that leads to account coverage. They don't know how that data supports territory and quota planning. They don't know how that supports, feeds, and gets feedback from customer success. The fact that they can't understand the 10 or 20 different places the data inside CRM is being used is a huge impediment. And I think that's a big thing. And the last is using data. Most organizations run on 25 specific assumptions about their markets, their customers, their go-to-market, their costs. In most companies, none of them are written down, much less data-driven. So the degree that a smart RevOps person can start to use data to quantify those assumptions, measure and test those assumptions, and improve those assumptions is a huge opportunity. In fact, I love this story. You show me a RevOps person who can manage data and speak the language of finance. I'll show you somebody who's in the boardroom in 3 weeks. And in fact, that is just catapults you into the C-suite. If you can explain the data and what it means to the go-to-market, the growth and value of the business, you're going to be a rock star in your organization. So financial acumen, connecting the dots across domains and functions, being able to talk to product people, finance people, sales people, and success people, and IT people, and taking data to explain how the business can run better. Those are the 3 things that hold people back. So I think you make a really good point, and it's that simple.
Yeah, the simple point, it is really simple just to reposition what you're doing. You could say, I fixed CRM and a broken process in lead to cash. Exactly what you did could also be said as, I helped increase win rates from 35 to 50%, which has an economic value of X. Just use the different language, and that language is going to be, attaboy, attagirl from the C-suite than a lot more than, hey, I've got other stuff to do.
Highlights the importance of connecting the dots between those inputs, those things that you're doing as an operator on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, and the financial results that get generated. We held our RevOpsAF conference recently in New Orleans. There was an opening keynote by Ryan Westwood, the CEO of Fullcast, and he talked a lot about what it meant to be strategic as a revenue operator. And he really boiled it down for everybody in the audience and said, whenever you hear a CEO, a board, anybody say, we want you to be more strategic, they essentially mean, tell me how the things you do accomplish one of 2 things: drive more revenue, right? Help us grow, or drive more profitability and margin, right? So start talking about those things you do in those 2 lenses, and you will not have to change anything about the work that you're doing, but you will now be seen as strategic. And Stephen, you let the cat out of the bag a little bit. That was my first job out of college. I was an auditor at Gladry and Paulin, focused on the healthcare vertical. It's actually one of the first clients that I had was Mayo Clinic. But yeah, that was way back in the day. But actually, the CPA thing is important. And this is one of my next questions for you, Steve, is we recently launched a revenue operations certification together in partnership. Part of the reason we did that was we looked at things like CPA, Certified Public Accountants. We looked at things like the PMP for project managers, project management professional. There's CFA for folks in finance. And this revenue operations thing has now been going on for several years. You all have seen it by working with a lot of the clients that you have. We've seen it obviously in the community. There's right and wrong ways to do this. There are kind of standardized things that every successful revenue operator should have in their toolkit. And that's one of the reasons why we launched and why we built this revenue operations certification based on the book that Stephen has written. So talk a little bit about the revenue operations certification, the why behind it. There's obviously a lot of content, a lot of stuff that's in there, and why we structured, or why you structured the curriculum in the way that you did in order to help operators be as successful as possible within their careers.
Could I jump in, Steve, here? So there's a lot of misunderstanding about RevOps. I've had the privilege, along with Steve, to work with literally thousands of sales, marketing, success, finance executives in the rubric of RevOps, CROs. I listen. Most of those interviews are in my book. But when you really think about RevOps, there's a lot of misunderstanding. It's a buzzword, it's a technology, it's a trend, whatever. There's a lot of content marketing and software vendors telling you what it is. At the end of the day, it's a system, just like total quality management, Kanban, Six Sigma. It's a system for continuously improving the growth performance of the company. And that system, people always talk about people, process, technology. Well, that system is the people, process, technology of growth, but it's also increasingly the data and finance of growth. One of the things I want to point out is RevOps is often described as breaking down silos, functional silos. Sales and marketing don't like each other. Technology silos. None of the systems are integrated. Data silos. I cannot organize data around the customer to tell you anything about it. And certainly that's true. But one of the big missing links, and I get this from training ops people and teaching at MBA programs, like Wharton and Boston University, and most recently Johns Hopkins, is there's an education silo. Every other function, has a degree. You can get a degree in finance. You can even get a degree in supply chain. 3 MBA programs teach anything about business development or sales, the largest job in the world. And no programs, except for now Johns Hopkins, are offering even a RevOps curriculum on an accredited basis. But what happens is we teach business in silos. You learn finance over here. You learn product marketing over here. You learn brand management over here. You learn customer segmentation over there. Nobody talks about how those things connect. And in the real world, all of those things are connected and everybody's part of that. So one of the reasons we did this program is to fill the education gap. If you look at 100 people in RevOps, I'll show you, you know them better than me. They're your 15,000 members, reconstituted salespeople, tech people. I have an English major who is now an EVP making a lot of money at a large financial services firm just because she learned some of these skills. And so nobody goes to college to become a RevOps person. They're repurposed or they volunteer for the job. And so none of these skills in process, people, technology, finance, and analytics are taught and integrated. And I know you kind of make fun of the fact that you started out as an accountant and I'm a finance major, but I take for granted what I know. And you take for granted what you know in everything you do. So if you never had that background, it's shocking to me. I'm not saying finance is the hardest job in the world, but the absence of it really makes you look kind of like an idiot. And people ask, well, why don't people respect me? And why don't I have good KPIs? And why can't I get budget? It's because you're not speaking the language. You're in France and you're speaking English. And you know how that goes. So at the end of the day, we wrote this program to fill this education gap. And it's organized, as I said, it starts with the process, the bow tie, but it's a closed loop process because you've got to continuously improve. We start with the people. We have 5 groups. You got to talk to marketing, sales, product, finance, IT. We explain what they do, how you work with them, how to talk with them, how you can actually help them. Technology. We break down the major food groups in the tech ecosystems. Finance. We give you a full curriculum in the math of the growth that will allow you to go into the C-suite, the boardroom, or anybody's office and speak the language of finance and explain even to your mother what you do in dollars and cents terms, but also, data. One of the big things and traps that RevOps people fall into is they become data janitors. Fix it, girl. Clean it up. Run the report. Connect the data. Explain the data. And that's fine. That's a necessary reality. But that data has knowledge that is the largest asset in your business. And what you should be really doing is turning that loose information, messy data into information and knowledge that makes you money. In the absence of that, you're going to burn yourself out trying to get money to fix that data, trying to fix it yourself, trying to explain it. And so that whole notion of systematically taking messy data and turning it into knowledge. Now we're talking about, recommender agents, AI chatbots. This is stuff everyone needs. But unless you understand how you provision that with knowledge and data, those are just going to be initiatives that lead to bad outcomes. And so much of RevOps is around knowledge being applied, next best sales action, next best product, pricing optimization. All it is taking messy data and turning it into a structure that creates value. And we spend too much time mopping up, cleaning, messing data. Our curriculum actually starts to give you a framework for moving to creating that value so you don't get caught in that trap of being a data janitor. And that's the curriculum. And I know I explained it in depth, but I think those are the skill gaps that would make any RevOps professionals successful. And we've seen people make a significantly more amount of money, get into the C-suite. I can name 10 people who got into the C-suite. These are people who are BDRs, tech people, English majors, because they understood these things.
I mean, Matt, you talk about RevOps as a strategic discipline. We 100% embrace that vision, and it's going to happen. Our mission is to accelerate the time in a period at which that happens. Creating the certification is a way to amplify the education. Everything Stephen just said about the holistic knowledge you need is only going to make that transformation faster. And then to have corporations that really start to get RevOps. When you hire a qualified accountant, you want to see if they have their CFA because it really means something. And you know your stuff, similar thing that, wow, you're RevOps certified. You're exactly the type of talent we need to, lead teams and drive execution of the revenue strategy. So it's intended to be a huge dose of oil into the gears of RevOps as an industry, as a profession. And yeah, we're thrilled to be partnering with RevOps Co-op.
And for anyone out there who does want to learn more about the certification, you can find it on our website, RevOpsCoop.com, under the course catalog or the course page. And a couple of other questions for you guys. We've obviously talked a lot about how revenue operators as individuals can advance their careers, how they can do more, accelerate where they're at, maybe within their current company, go to other companies and level up, take that next step. Curious on how you see things actually from the employer side. So the people that are doing the hiring, that are making the promotion decisions, what are the things, Steve, that are important for an employer or maybe a revenue operations leader as they're going out and looking for talent, maybe spots to fill within their current team, people that are on their team to advance, promote? What are the important hiring decisions and career advancement decisions that employers should be thinking of?
Yeah, I mean, one angle of that, if you follow, what's happening with CROs, which is related, right? But it's this, hey, we've got silos. We need someone to oversee it because they're all on the same team. But, most CRO don't work. The average tenure is 18 months. The CEO mindset of this is a problem and I want to hire somebody. An issue is that the CRO comes in, but yes, they've got sales, marketing, and success, but they don't control IT in most cases, don't control product. They're missing some of the, empowerment to be able to affect change across the entire revenue cycle. So RevOps, I think, it's like a mini version of that, but the intent is there by the companies. And I would, boil it down as a, former and current CEO, but people that can see the entire forest, the entire revenue cycle. Everybody knows there's dysfunction at a company, but to be able to diagnose that, prioritize it, and then affect change, if you can communicate that you have done that or can do that, and importantly, what we talked about, put some of the math of growth around that, what it means to the top or bottom line or to customer experience, there will be unlimited demand for that type of talent. It might take a little bit of time because when I read a RevOps job description at the typical company, it's not capturing, what the job should be. We're trying to change that. But I guess my advice to people listening or out there is to take some risk. You don't underestimate how much knowledge you have about elements, or if not the entire sort of revenue cycle and the way the company works, and go share your ideas. I used to love it if people came into my office and said, you know what, we've got a problem with retention. I think I know what it is. I want to run it by you and talk about some ideas and how we can fix it. I dropped everything when those types of conversations happen. And I think RevOps a position to do that, whether it's with the CEO, CRO, COO, whoever it may be, there's only upside, I think, if you go in, and it's a fun way to sort of test and learn and expand out your comfort zone. But that'll help create more demand for those skills because they'll be like, what else you got, right? Okay, we've got an acquisition problem too, not just a churn problem.
Can I comment on your question? Because I think it's an important one.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
90% of organizations are doing some transformation of the go-to-market to grow faster. Some call it RevOps, some call it digital transformation, doesn't matter. People, process, technology is getting aligned. Typically, those initiatives involve three things. A reorganization. McKinsey comes in, they reorganize and stick somebody on top of that. They buy a big technology platform and they call it RevOps, or they put a banner on the wall and say, we're going to be more customer-centric. So at the end of the day, none of the guts of what RevOps people do on a day-to-day basis, particularly what matters, is addressed there. Let's look at that organization. There's usually a CXO. That person has a broader remit for sales and marketing. The names: Chief Revenue Officer, Chief Commercial Officer, Chief Growth Officer, Chief Operating Officer. Basically, it's a person with a remit. Steve Busby makes a great point. That remit is always too thin. There are 30 some odd factors in an organization that drive value. Some of them are talent. Some of them are marketing. No one person in the organization or function owns all of them. They're spread all over the place. And so to have a figurehead sitting on top of that without any teeth, as Steve points out, is ridiculous. So that remit, we put people in those jobs. They don't have the skills. They don't have the remit or the cooperation necessary to work. That's one problem. The second problem is talent. How do I get a RevOps person? Well, it's hard because they're scarce. Do I build one? Do I buy one? So if I acquire one, a problem we see is they don't know how to write the job remit. If they can't even describe the job and the KPI, they're going to recruit somebody that probably doesn't have the right skills. So we've written a job description and a benchmark of what you should be looking for. And finally, is it better to build or buy? I would argue the talent resides in the organization. Warren Zenna, who runs the CRO Collective, says that RevOps is the farm system for the next generation of growth leaders. I think Steve and I would say RevOps is the farm system for the next generation of growth CEOs. But at the end of the day, you're almost better off in building what you have. A woman who runs RevOps at Microsoft likes to say, I want to take my RevOps people, and they have antis. They're great at CRM, they're great at CPQ, and I want to give them eagle eyes and look across the organization so they can grow and be more successful. That's a lot about what the certification in our textbook is all about. We have a financial model that can explain what needs to be in their control. The job descriptions aren't correct. We've got a job rec that can help them at least recruit and ask for the right skills. And I believe we should be building RevOps people because you can't go to, Harvard Business School and find them. You can't recruit for them. You can't, like you can other functions. And so a lot of people are going to have to build them from the talent who have incredible domain expertise and understanding and their hands on the growth assets in the business. They just need the skills, perspective, and empowerment to lead. So I think it's a big issue, but it boils down to those things. And if you want to bet the technology is going to do it or an org chart's going to do it, it's a formula for failure. And I think everyone knows that.
And so last question for you guys. I'm actually kind of astonished we made it this far and I haven't asked you a question about AI. I know Stephen has mentioned it a handful of times, but I want to say up to this point, probably less than 5 times we've mentioned AI, and we're now, 30 plus minutes into the conversation. So it obviously can't be a podcast episode without asking about AI. So Stephen, you've obviously written the book on revenue operations in partnership with Revenue Operations Associates, RevOps Co-op. We put this certification together that we've talked a lot about. We now have AI that is very loud. It's everywhere that you look. And the people are, at least right now, still, I think, very much trying to figure out, how should I be using AI? How can I be using AI? How does this impact my current job? How does this impact my future job? And so let's talk about, to kind of round things out, Stephen, the future of revenue operations. If you were to rewrite your book now, or if you were to rewrite a book that would, be published in 5 years, what would that kind of look like? How does AI play into the role of revenue operations, the career of a revenue operator? What does the future look like?
Well, look, every executive over the age of 50 is an AI expert, particularly the guys who never took Boolean algebra. I, at least I'm an engineer, but I have the privilege of working with Wharton AI and at least being in the room where the conversation on AI is happening. And I have a couple of observations. From a financial standpoint and from an accounting standpoint, Everyone talks about AI, intelligence, and data. The largest financial asset in a business, the only one recognized by accountants like you, Matt, is codified knowledge. That represents 90% of the value of Microsoft. So if you're looking at impacting the share price of Microsoft, that's IP, that's data, that's essentially software. RevOps people, when it relates to AI, are sitting on the biggest asset in the business. That's knowledge, go-to-market know-how, customer data, and things like that. RevOps, we are rewriting the book. In fact, we've written a lecture with the 25 ways AI creates value for the business. And it doesn't do it on its own. It's codifying the knowledge and getting that in place. If I can codify and package my knowledge, including go-to-market know-how between the ears of experts in your organization, I can do 25 things. Let's think about it. Next best action, next best content, pricing recommendations, writing RFPs, answering any customer question accurately and quickly. This is what RevOps, sales ops are supposed to be doing, but it doesn't do it by magic. That knowledge has to be codified. So when I think about AI, people are talking about agents and prompts and whiz-bang this. All of it is garbage if it's calling the wrong data, if it's giving you the wrong price, and it's not capturing that knowledge. In the analytics module of our class, we have this report, which we can probably give to everybody, 25 applications of AI. That gets to what I want. How can I use AI to create value? We've identified 25 ways. All of them are dependent on a RevOps person pulling that knowledge out of first-party systems, brains, product managers, third-party systems, disparate technology platforms, putting it in a place so that I can do those things. Because if I'm writing an RFP, the data's got to be right, the pricing's got to be right, and the product's got to be right. The use cases are myriad, but garbage in, garbage out, and the risks of AI are huge. If you get it wrong, you can have compliance issues, cash flow issues, customer abrasion issues. So we identified 25 ways AI creates value, but we talk more about what RevOps can do to provision those with knowledge. So you go from a data janitor to the person putting gasoline behind AI. And I'll pause there, but we can get very specific on that front, and we can even send a video to you on that.
No, it makes sense. I think revenue operations and revenue operators have been a critical part of the growth equation and are a critical part of every company. We've seen that demonstrated by the growth in the role over the last 5 years. If you look at the implementation of artificial intelligence and the fact that that is kind of taking over right now and will be a critical part of every company's strategy going forward, you in revenue operations are uniquely positioned. You're sitting at the center of all of that stuff. People, process, technology, data. You know where the bodies are buried. You know where systems are broken. You know the things you can rely on, the things you can't. You know where handoffs are kind of shaky or messy, right? That knowledge. And so if anyone at your company is well equipped to own anything AI related that is supposed to generate positive revenue outcomes, it is you as a revenue operator, which is why I keep saying you at RevOps have the most important job at your company, the most important job, because revenue is going to be the way that every business is ultimately judged, right? And if you are sitting at the intersection of that, you are so incredibly critically important.
I tell you, rock, paper, scissors, everybody is competing to be the AI king or queen of their company. And one of my idols is a woman who is literally a language arts major. And she applied this financial discipline, identified the knowledge. She is now in charge of all AI initiatives for commercialization in a $10 billion financial services company. And she has no math background, but she played the knowledge game to say, these are our knowledge assets. I'm going to show you how to monetize these. And now she's in the C-suite. And there's a lot of other people, obviously, trying to be the expert in AI, but that's a winning hand. And you said it best, Matt. RevOps owns those assets, has their hands in those assets, and is in best position to monetize those assets.
Steve, any parting words, final thoughts that we didn't hit on there? Maybe to amplify what you said about RevOps being in a unique position, because I'm having a lot of conversations these days. We're in the hype cycle of AI. Every function saying, ooh, that's sexy, let me go do it. But people are starting, the C-suite, to say, time out, let's take a holistic look at the entire business and really start to think more strategically and holistically about where AI can, again, better, faster, cheaper, improve CX, and starting to prioritize and come up with a smarter, longer-term AI strategy, which is going to be hybrid. It's not going to be, a binary, this is a person, this is an agent. It'll be all kinds of mixed. But I couldn't agree more with your point that where RevOps can add a ton of value and is a unique position to help with that sort of holistic assessment and start to frame out, again, a longer term, more thoughtful, how do we make this better with AI, not just do something that benefits being touted by a point solution vendor. I think it's another sort of great opportunity, being a RevOps professional, to participate in that, assessment and implementation.
Well, Steve, thank you guys so incredibly much for dropping some knowledge on us today. That is all that I've got for you, though. So with that, I will let you all run. I'll see you all on the flip side. Take it easy. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, everybody.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.
Keep it RevOpsAF, y'all.